Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy. What are you talking about today?
Our win is going to span, again, you know how I like to do,
The 70s.
over nearly 2 decades. So 1989 to 2006. Our where? Grab your passport, Claire, because we're going to be headed to France. Our son bitch this week is Dominique Cottrez, and I could be butchering her name. I'm going to say that I am, but she's a murderer.
Because it doesn't sound
so I
French
don't
when
care.
you say it.
I don't speak of the French.
Or the English.
So Dominique was arrested in July of 2010 for infanticide. Infanticide is the crime of killing a baby under 1 year old, specifically in some jurisdictions, murdered by their mother. Now let's backtrack to 1963 when Oscar and Marie-Louise Lempereur welcomed the birth of their daughter Dominique. Dominique says that when she was just the tender age of 8, her father, Oscar, would creep into her bedroom for the first time and he raped her. Dominique says her father would continue to rape her throughout her childhood and into her teen years.
Ugh. When she was 8?
8.
Where was her mom?
Sleeping? I have no idea. Eventually, Dominique would go on to marry a man named Pierre-Marie Cottrez. Pierre was a carpenter and a member of the local council. Dominique worked as a nurse's aide. They would go on to have 2 daughters together, Emmeline and a year later, Virginia. Dominique would struggle with her weight throughout her life. She would average on the heavier side of 250 pounds, and she would push nearly 300 pounds while pregnant.
Good night.
As the years went on, Dominique found out she was pregnant. She decided she didn't want anybody to know about the pregnancy and decided to conceal the fact that she was expecting from her husband and daughters. After keeping a huge secret for roughly 9 months, Dominique went into labor while at home. Seems like it might be time to tell the family, huh? But no.
Yeah.
Instead, Dominique endures the labor alone. After what had to have felt like forever, a tiny little baby was born. Dominique held the bed sheets over her newborn to smother the infant to death. She then wrapped the baby's body in a sheet and stashed it in her closet until she could get rid of it.
What the fuck?
Dominique hid the murdered infant's remains in the garden in her front yard. Dominique then found out, shortly after, that she was pregnant again. And again, she decided to conceal the pregnancy from everyone. She went into labor while working at the hospital, and I didn't see anywhere where it said she suffered from seizures, but she claims that she suffered an epileptic fit and went into labor. She delivered the baby into the hospital toilet. She lifted the baby out of the toilet water, looked down at her tiny little baby as she began to strangle it to death. She then placed the infant's lifeless body into a plastic bag and hid it in a cabinet until it was time for her to head home from work. Once home, when convenient, Dominique added this lifeless body to the garden with the other murdered infant's remains.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Dominique carried on with her life as normal. In 1991, Dominique and Pierre sold their home. They must have really liked the area, though, because they bought another house that was just a half mile up the road.
Maybe it was smaller.
Maybe. In 1991, their daughters were born in the 80s, so they're still kids. So she's murdered 2 babies and put them in the garden. And the garden in which she put them in was in a house that they sold in 1991. They move a half mile up the road. Now we're going to fast forward through their marriage and their daughters growing up. Now their oldest daughter is an adult with a 2-year-old son, and their grandchild and their daughter are living at home with them. The next major event in her life is in 2007 when Dominique's father, Oscar, passes away. Fast forward 3 more years, by mid-July 2010, the homeowner of Dominique and Pierre's old house was doing some yard work. They were digging out an area for a duck pond, and while clearing away the dirt, the homeowner discovered the remains of one of the babies wrapped in a plastic bag. He immediately contacted police, and upon investigation, the officers discovered the remains of the second infant. The officers then decided to contact the previous owners, and that eventually led them to knock on Dominique and Pierre's door. Dominique immediately admitted to disposing of the babies. After searching their home, officers were horrified to find the bodies of not one, not two, but 6 more infants. Dominique had stashed the tiny little bodies inside of a tank in their garage. That's 8 babies that she's killed.
I have no words. I thought you didn't like the kid dying cases. And here you pick one that has 8 infants?
I know. This one it made my jaw drop.
So not to look at it from her side of things, but if she doesn't admit to smothering them, couldn't she just say they were stillborn and she didn't realize she had to report it?
No, because when I get into their autopsies, they can show that they took breath. So it's really twisted and sick. The police brought everyone in the household in for questioning. Pierre said that he was completely unaware of the babies' remains in the garden or in their garage. Emmeline, their adult...
He did a lot of paying attention.
Right. Emmeline, who at this point in time is their adult daughter with a 2-year-old and was living with them, said she never knew her mom was pregnant. Throughout her childhood, her mom was obviously pregnant and giving birth and then killing these babies, her would-be siblings. But when the police asked both daughters, because the other daughter grew up in that house and those babies had been killed between the 80s until 2006. Okay, so you might not have known that she was pregnant, but what about the odors? The smell of a decomposing baby could not have gone unnoticed by the adults, right?
I feel like it's easy to blame the trash.
Their response quite literally made me laugh out loud. Now, keep in mind, with interrogations, people are separated. When these adults, the 2 daughters, Pierre, are confronted with what about the smell, they each admitted that yes, there was in fact a foul odor in the house. However, they assumed that the stench was either from sewage, which, ew, call a plumber, or the family believed the stench could possibly be coming from Pierre's feet.
Yeah. What?
That one made me laugh because it was like, right? Like his feet, the smell of decomposing bodies could be mistaken as sewage or feet. Right? I felt really bad for Pierre because his feet. Seriously? His feet? It's disgusting.
Sounds like you need an ointment for that.
It sounds like you should just chop them off because that's bad.
It's called gangrene.
Dominique told investigators that she did act alone, but she claimed that she wasn't the one to bury the babies in the garden. Police believe that Pierre assisted his wife in the disposal of the infants' remains, but Pierre continued to say, it wasn't me, and Dominique continued to say Pierre never knew that she was pregnant or what she was doing. When the officers asked her how was she able to conceal the pregnancies from her husband, her daughters, her neighbors, the medical staff at the hospital where she worked, she said that since she was so overweight, nobody noticed if she packed on a few extra pounds here or there.
That's depressing.
I know. When it came time for birthing the babies, she typically gave birth in a bathroom, on a towel, or on the toilet.
How was she doing any of her work, though? Sounds like she just waddled on in there, squeezed it out, and went back to work.
You know what? I've had quite a few children, and I can tell you, while I was told I was up and at them pretty quick, I couldn't imagine cranking out a baby and going back to work caring for people. Because you're lifting things, and I feel like that's...
Maybe she wasn't that hard of a worker.
Maybe. When asked why would she kill her own children, Dominique told police about how she was raped by her father, first when she was 8, and then repeatedly through her childhood and throughout her teen years. Dominique then confessed to the police that at some point, the sexual abuse was no longer abuse. She admitted that she decided she wanted to have sex with her father, and their sexual relationship became consensual.
I don't believe that's a thing. She was just conditioned,
Right.
and she was less fucked up about it if she believed she also wanted to be included.
She also confessed to the police that the incestuous relationship with her dad continued into an adulthood, even after she married her husband, Pierre. She said she was in love with her father more than her husband.
You're trying to make me vomit today.
Dominique continued to horrify the officers by explaining her logic behind the senseless slayings of her 8 infants. She said she believed her father had fathered some of the babies, and rather than use birth control or just have her daddy wear a condom, she let him blow his load inside her, letting her justify murdering her 8 babies since she wasn't sure who the baby daddy was.
Like,
Dominique did not view her actions as murder or killing, but more as a means of contraception.
um,
Is you speechless?
yeah. Mainly because I don't believe those were all her words. She let him blow his load in her, Andrea.
It's in French. I'll translate it.
Loosely. Just like this poor lady's vagina.
It's a clown car. They just keep falling out.
Dude, that's what it sounds like. She's like, I don't know where they keep coming from.
Oh,
That's
she
a lot.
knows.
Why
It's
wouldn't you just,
disgusting,
like, have a tubal ligation or just, like, put a quit to the baby making factory some sort of way?
right? So autopsies were performed on all 8 infants. It showed that the babies were killed within seconds of being born. All were live births. All were strangled or smothered by one of the people that were meant to have protected them no matter what.
How can they tell they
The
took
first,
breaths?
so you can tell because their lungs have expanded.
But if some of them were in the flower bed for a while, there wouldn't be lungs to look at.
So she admitted to some of them. And
That's what
she
I was
admitted
saying
she does.
earlier. Is that if she didn't admit to some of them, then she could be like, I don't know.
Well, even the older ones, they could tell, or I mean, the newer corpses, they could tell that the babies had taken breath. So even if she didn't admit to all of them, it could be proven that at least one of them had taken a breath.
Yeah, but I'm just
So,
saying, the jury, she might have had a better shot at a defense if she hadn't been all truthful like.
well, the first infant was killed in 1989, and the last baby was murdered in 2007. Her daughters are lucky that she didn't smother them. And I'm not saying that to be obnoxious, but why did she choose to keep the first 2 and then get rid of all the others?
Maybe one of
But I
them looks
guess
like her dad.
she knew that the first 2 were her husbands.
Or, again, it didn't occur to her, and then it was like, you know what? Come to think of this, she looks an awful lot like my pa. And then by that point, she couldn't exactly say the kid doesn't exist anymore. And then all those thoughts started creeping in. And then she started wondering if that kid was her pa's. And then she was like, I can't take the chance, just on the off chance. Seems like everything's formed correctly on this one, but can't take a chance of having a 3-eyed child.
So that's where my brain was at when I was reading this case as well. But let's keep going. Dominique was arrested on July 29th, 2010. She would sit in jail until August 2012 when she was released by an appeals court while she awaited her trial under the conditions that she must continue to seek therapy for the psychological issues she suffered from. So she had a conditional release of while she waited to go to trial, keep seeing your therapist.
Seems like good advice.
By July 2nd, 2015, so nearly 5 years later, after she was originally arrested, Dominique had her day in court. And after the jury deliberated for 5 hours about the murderer's guilt or innocence, they convicted Dominique of first-degree murder for 7 of the infants and second-degree murder for another infant. The jury felt that the first baby she strangled to death was not premeditated. The prosecutors, however, wanted Dominique to get the maximum sentence of 18 years. The prosecutor said, in his opinion, Dominique needed to go to prison so that she could realize the absolute horror of the crimes that she had committed. And
So I have mixed
I
feelings
realized,
about this one because she's a victim herself. Not to say that she shouldn't be held responsible, but the amount of fucked up her brain is from the very beginning, from this first time her Paul did anything to her, is just like, she's pretty fucked up. She needs a whole awful lot of therapy.
Dominique's daughters begged the court during the sentencing to please not send their mother back to prison. She was already in prison for 2 years. Please don't send her back. The jury came back and said since they felt Dominique had a limited mental capacity at the time of the killings of her babies, she was sentenced to only 9 years. Relieved at her light sentencing, Dominique hugged her husband and their 2 adult daughters, Emmeline, who at that point in time was 28, and Virginia, who was 27. Fun fact, Dominique has supposedly confessed to killing at least 2 other infants that have not yet been recovered. So that's 10 babies.
Her Paul was real fertile.
Another fun fact for you, Claire. During the investigation, police discovered through DNA tests that Pierre, Dominique's husband, had in fact fathered all 8 infants that were recovered. And when confronted with this evidence, in a dramatic court moment, Dominique confessed that she lied. She made up all of it about her father. Her dad never touched her.
What?
Surprise!
You have severe mental issues. I was wrong.
I
knew
don't.
there were mental issues in this one. I didn't realize they were yours.
I don't. This is what this lady was saying. I kept reading all these documents and it was talking about how she was abused at 8 and sexually abused. And I was like, this poor woman grew up being abused.
She needs to be retried and then throw on the charge of perjury.
Well, I wanted to know, well, then if they were her husband's kids, she wasn't mentally fucked by her dad screwing her entire life.
She's just mentally
What is
fucked.
her reason for killing her babies?
She was tired of doing all the diapers.
Is that your guess for why she killed 8 to 10 infants?
There were too many crumbs.
Dominique continued to try to explain away her actions by telling the court that the midwife she had fat-shamed her for being severely overweight during the birth of her and Pierre's first daughter, Emmeline.
But she delivered them herself.
Rather than try to be healthier, she opted just to never go to the doctor again. She decided she did not feel comfortable going to the doctor for contraception, and she decided to use her obesity to her advantage and hide her pregnancies from everyone. So because she was fat-shamed, she justified killing her babies.
No, because she was trying to blame it on her Paul, who didn't diddle her, and basically just smutted up his memory with their grandkids since he died at whatever point. That's disgusting.
Right? And how twisted do you have to be to use your dad as your scapegoat for killing 8 to 10 babies?
No,
you're disgusting. And I think she blamed him because he died 3 years prior to her being arrested and couldn't be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I don't believe her. I feel like once the cat was out of the bag of, these aren't your dad's, and none of them, not one. And she's like, oh, well, fine. I was backed into a corner. You found me out. It was because I was fat-shamed. Bullshit. Then if they would have tracked down and been like, turns out you didn't use the same midwife. Why didn't you go back to the other one? And then she'd be like, well, it wasn't really so much. She didn't say anything, but I saw it in her eyes that she thought I was fat. Well, okay, there are plenty of fat people out there that don't smother 10 children.
Right?
There's also some out there that do smother their children, case we previously did. And she can't even use that anyway because she squeezed out those babies. She didn't have to go to the doctor then. They could have. And really, she should have fat-shamed herself because the fact that she had 10 pregnancies and no one ever noticed.
My mind was blown on this one. I do have pictures of her. She is a heavy-set lady. And I can't wrap my head around murdering babies as a form of contraception.
That's because it's not a thing, Andrea. They're already conceived, so it's not a form of contraception.
So, fun fact here for you. I have it written down as a random fun fact. So, Dominique went to trial in 2015, right?
I liked your misspeak there. She's Dominique.
A few months prior, in March, another woman named Celine Lesage, she too was a French woman. She was sentenced to 15 years for killing 6 of her newborns.
The hell's going on in France?
She strangled 2 of her babies and suffocated 4. She then stashed the bodies of the babies in plastic bags and stored them in the basement of her apartment. Her
I
boyfriend
think I think
accidentally
they
found their tiny remains.
I think they need to do some parenting classes because they're not doing it right in France.
A side note on Celine, all 6 of her murdered infants were born between 2000 and 2007. 5
Were
of the
they
babies were from her previous boyfriend, and the 6th was fathered by her current boyfriend. A
eh,
side note on Celine,
were they related?
Celine, no, Celine packed up the remains of the first 5 dead babies and brought them with her when she moved into her newest boyfriend's apartment.
Mm.
And side note on Celine, she also had a 14-year-old son.
She tried to smother him, he just wouldn't take.
And to take us jump out of France, on another kind of side note, I was reading a news alert the other day about a woman in Portland, Oregon named Sharday McDonald. She was 30 years old and she just pled guilty to waterboarding her 13-month-old son back in October of 2021. Not only did she waterboard her baby boy, but then she placed the wailing infant into the freezer, all to see if her boyfriend, her baby daddy, gave a shit about the baby. The
Because
baby's
she
father,
didn't.
the baby's father, Kendrick Neal, called police apparently after he received images of Sharday holding their infant upside down by his onesie, and the baby appeared to be trying to hold his breath while water poured over his face and had nowhere to go but up the helpless baby's nose. She admitted to the police when they showed up that her actions were out of spite to see if Kendrick gave a fuck. Her words, not mine. And she wanted to see if he would come back to her apartment. Thankfully, the baby did survive. However, even with her admitting to the actions, having video and pictures, she was only sentenced to 30 days. 30 days for
Mental
waterboarding her
hospital.
baby.
I'm gonna go back to what I originally said. For somebody who don't like the kid ones, you sure did pick a couple doozies to overwhelm. And
Right?
by the way, fuck, you didn't do any triggers of all the smotherings and the waterboarding.
I technically did do a trigger by telling you she was arrested for infanticide and then explained to you what that was.
I wasn't listening.
That's your fault.
Well, you were jumping all around.
Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. I just scrolled up to the top of my notes and I said that our song bitch this week was Dominique Cottrez. She was arrested July of 2010 for infanticide, and infanticide is the crime of killing a baby under 1 year old, specifically in some jurisdictions by the mother, is what I done started my case with.
Yeah, I thought you were just reading more fun facts. It was the word of the day.
That's all I got.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.